Hello, this is Adrian Day with another of our video highlights. If you'd like to learn more about the topic that we discussed today, you can watch the full interviews on our website at adriandayassetmanagement.com, where of course you can also find more information about our services. Sit back and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. People are not spending money on long-term, durable goods. If you look at employment, yes, the new jobs creation is good. It beat the estimate. The unemployment rate is low and static. It's not moving up. But look underneath that and you see that the ADP, which is the private sector company that does job estimates, has a number wildly different from the government number, much lower. And I'm not suggesting that the government is fiddling the numbers, but there's something wrong with the methodology. First of all, you've got those huge revisions, first and second month. They publish it, the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes a number, and then next month they revise it, and then there's a second revision 2 months later. And we've been seeing huge revisions in the numbers, mostly downwards. You're also seeing a big difference between the private sector ADP numbers and the government numbers, Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm not suggesting that the BLS is deliberately faking the numbers for political reasons, but clearly there's something wrong with the methodology. So the only people buying treasuries at the moment, longer-term treasuries, I should say, are pension funds and insurance companies with long-dated liabilities, mutual funds, income mutual funds that are buying them, and frankly, hedge funds, but are buying them to make a quick profit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they're going, all of the hedge funds are going to want higher rates to buy long-term treasuries. Mm-hmm. So we're stuck
to buy or to hold long-term treasuries.
Well, even to buy them, because if they buy them and looking to sell them, they want to start from a higher place where rates have a possibility of coming down.
Right.
So you're left with a situation where this year, where you have a much larger supply coming on in a much shorter period of time, and at the same time, fewer buyers. And that links back to what we were talking about earlier with Trump. If Trump is antagonizing half of the world, including half of the world that buys US treasuries, the situation today is just sort of coming to a head. Mm-hmm. And all of these things, when you have a lot of debt, it's like Hemingway said about, in that hackneyed phrase, about bankruptcy. How do you go bankrupt? Slowly at first and then suddenly. Mm-hmm. Well, when you have a lot of debt and you have a lot of debt payments, debt service, and the debt service payments, remember, for a household or for a company, or for a company or for a government, are only servicing your debt. Mm-hmm. You're not paying down a debt at all. Mm-hmm. And so you can go on for a long, long time, increasing your debt, increasing your service, debt service payments, but you reach a point where it becomes a tipping point, mm-hmm. where the debt service becomes unacceptably high. And we're not there yet in the US, I don't think, but we're getting very close. And as the 5 and 7 year treasuries that were issued, the treasuries that were issued 5 and 7 years ago that are rolling over, that are maturing and coming due, you are now having to replace a 7-year bill that was a 7-year note that was issued at, let's say, 3% or 2.5% 7 years ago, mm-hmm. and you're having to replace that. Even if you replace it with a 6-month or 1 year, you're replacing it at almost double the interest rate. Mm-hmm. So the debt service payments are just going to start going up dramatically. Mm-hmm. And there's not an awful lot that can be done about that in the immediate term. I think the other big thing to focus on is if we're going to see the Fed pivot from QT to QE. As you know, they've been quantitative tightening for a few years now, but this year they've really begun to wind down their QT from 35 billion a month to 25 billion a month to two meetings ago, down to 5 billion a month. And 5 billion a month on and this is just this is just maturities, but they're not rolling over. This isn't actually selling anything. It's just things mature, and so you don't buy more. 5 billion a month on a $7 trillion balance sheet is sort of, I won't say meaningless, but it's pretty small potatoes. The big question to me is, will the Fed have to step in as they have before on more than one occasion, and start buying treasuries?
Now we've got an extra $1.6 trillion that they have to sell in 3 months instead of over 12 months. So it's a huge amount of supply, a huge amount of additional supply. That's regardless of the debt going up anyway. A huge amount of extra supply in a very short period of time. And that comes at a time when some of the biggest buyers of treasuries are no longer there. China, Japan are no longer there. I mean, the driver to have a light touch on stable coins, if they're fully backed by the treasuries, is clearly an attempt to find another source of buying for treasuries. Mm-hmm. Because the treasury market, as you know, a lot of the traditional buyers of treasuries.
But there'll be no problems selling treasuries at the short end, right? Because frankly, it's not a bad place to put money right now. There's no other place where you can get higher yields at a reasonably similar risk than buying short-term treasuries.
I think ultimately my sense is that if they can't sell all of those treasuries at reasonable rates without rates moving up dramatically, then the Fed is going to come in and start QE again.
And I suspect very strongly that gap will be met by the Fed. So the Fed, which is already basically stopped QT, I mean, Powell pretends they haven't, but they've gone from 35 billion a month to 25 billion a month to 5 billion a month. $5 billion a month with a balance sheet of almost 7 trillion is basically a rounding error. It's meaningless. Mm-hmm. And so QT is quantitative tightening, where they sell treasuries and reduce the balance sheet, is basically over. And I suspect that once the debt ceiling's raised, you're going to see the Fed go back to QE, and the Fed is going to be the buyer, as it was, for most of the last 10 years, or 15 years since 2008, is going to be a major buyer, if not the major buyer, of longer-term treasuries. Well, what does that mean? When they introduce QE again, it's going to be negative for the dollar. It's going to be negative for the bond market, in my view, but it's going to be wildly bullish for gold.